As I clear my throat, good morning, everybody. My name's Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio on October 9th, 2024. So you only got a couple of weeks left before you get your Halloween costumes in order. And by the way, today is the day that poor Tampa is expecting, Tampa, Florida is expecting Hurricane Milton to hit. And we wish everybody good fortune down there. It's tough and kind of like the old Edgar Allan Poe, the pit and the pendulum, as the thing gets closer and closer to you. I wish them well down there. And by the way, a lot of people, and this is important, you know, the schools get besides everything else, the schools get totally disrupted. All right, education gets disrupted. Think about the poor folks up in Asheville and that area in North Carolina. There's no schools. Okay, there's no communication, no electricity, no whatever the case may be. So we're no housing. All right, so what are you going to do? It's really tough, and these things have far-reaching implications. So good luck, Tampa. That's all I can say as it comes down. We have a wonderful person as our guest today. We have Jessica Lander, who I'm going to bring on in 1 minute or so, but it's going to take me a while to introduce you to her. Jessica is an award-winning teacher. She's an author, a researcher, an advocate, who has taught immigrant students from more than 30 countries since 2015 in civics and history. She's on sabbatical this year from Lowell High School in good old Lowell, Massachusetts. And if you've never been there, you should go there. They have a great national park all about American industry and textiles, etc. This year she's on sabbatical. She was named let's sit through this, Jess. I know you can hear me. Jessica was named a top 50 finalist for Global Teacher Prize in 2021, a 2023 Mass Teacher of the Year finalist, and the 2023 Mass History Teacher of the Year, which she won or got or whatever. She's the author of a new book, which is what we're going to focus on today, which is called Making Americans, subtitled Stories of Historic Struggles, New Ideas, and Inspiration in Immigrant Education. Okay, and in 2019, Jess and 14 of her former students launched the national, this is called the We Are America Project, working with teachers across the country to support more than 1,500 students sharing their stories of American identity. She is a, quote, reimagining migration fellow and was a 2019-2020 Emerson Collective Fellow. In other words, Jessica is pretty amazing. She might not be more amazing than you, but she sure as heck is more amazing than me, and I'm bringing her on right now. You're more amazing than me, Jessica.
Oh, Larry, thank you so much for that really generous introduction. It's really, I mean, I'm inspired by so many folks out in the colleagues, both in Lowell and across the country. So it's an honor to be able to do this work alongside everyone.
Well, believe me, it's an honor to have you on the show. You are really something. You are what I hope every teacher longs to be. Okay, and you're doing great. And now I'm going to ask the simple question. What are you doing on sabbatical? You plugs in the book. What's going on? You're on sabbatical. Let's start there. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, no. So I set out to write Making Americans now a number of years ago and stepped out of my classroom to learn in the classroom of others. And one of the things that I was struck by was how many innovative, creative experiments and just like really creative educators were out across the country, from classrooms in North Carolina to North Dakota, but how those, their work, their ideas, their innovations weren't necessarily known outside of their community. I'll give you the example of there's extraordinary work happening in Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is just 15
right next to
minutes
you.
away from me.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. And I knew nothing about it.
Wow.
And
there
so one of the things that has really stayed with me since writing the book is this need to both identify and then connect great educators and schools across the country who are struggling and want to support immigrant students in the best ways they can. And so how do we connect each other and learn from each other? So I've been trying to do a bunch of that work while full-time in the classroom, and that's hard to do both well at the same time. And so I'm taking a little bit of time to step back from the classroom, though I miss the classroom deeply.
They miss you, believe me.
Yeah.
They do.
And so to do some of that work of bringing folks together, tackling really sort of concrete issues in immigrant education so that we can better support immigrant origin students across the Commonwealth here in Massachusetts or across the country, and to really just tap into the strengths of educators and the innovation of educators in schools across the country. That's what I'm working on right now.
Man, you're going to heaven. Okay, you're going to heaven. Those things on your back, you may think they're shoulder blades. They aren't. They are little wings that are sprouting. Okay, by the time you're ready to go, they'll be all set, ready to fly right up. Okay, really, you're amazing. Okay, it's incredible. And have you been in Massachusetts your whole life? Were you a Massachusettsian?
I was born and raised in Mass, but I first fell in love with education halfway around the world in Thailand. That was where I first taught, was at Chiang Mai University in Thailand. And It was one of those pivotal moments for me. I planned to spend a year in the classroom and then go work in education policy. And I remember after my last class in Chiang Mai, driving my motorbike to a local temple and a park and sitting there and sobbing. And recognizing that the classroom, this community we had created together with my students, was gone, that it had ended and it wasn't coming back, and realizing that moment that I needed to remain in the classroom. And so I intended to be in the classroom for a year, and that was back in 2010. And so it was transformative. So most of my life I've lived in Mass.
There. Yep.
Thank you. But most of my life in Mass. But definitely some time teaching in Thailand and Cambodia and learning from schools in Tanzania as well.
Wow, you've got the experience of non-Americans and culture all wrapped up into one. That's so important to bring all that into a classroom. And your book, by the way, again, I have it linked here, Making American Stories of Historic Struggles, etc. This has struck me. I just got to say this. The book was recently recognized with the George Orwell Award. I'm not familiar with that award, but it's from the National Council of Teachers of English, which I was very impressed with since you were a history major. You're a history teacher.
I mean, I'm so deeply honored. And I just found out recently that the National Council of the Teachers of English honored the book with this award. And it's an award that recognizes clear and honest communication of pressing issues in the public interest. Which is just, it makes my heart glow. Deeply humbled to be in the company of just a whole wide range of illustrious past recipients, from John Stewart to Michael Pollan to Noam Chomsky. I'm just really grateful.
And Jessica Lambert.
But I mean, the National Council of Teachers of English is one of those organizations that brings educators together, community leaders together, researchers together, so that we get to learn from each other, and is lifting up exemplary educators across the country. And so in the same way that I'm trying to this year really bring people together and identify those folks, I'm so deeply grateful for organizations like the National Council of Teachers of English for doing this work, for connecting us, for creating opportunities for us to learn from each other. And I'm so honored by this award.
Right, and you deserve it. That's all I'm going to keep it that way. You deserve it. Okay, and they're a great group. I work with them a lot. Okay,
they're wonderful.
And they are. They're a nice group. NCTE, National Council Teachers of English. So is NCSS, the Council of Social Studies. So I love them too. They're terrific.
Absolutely,
as well.
Same.
I want to give you a chance to get stand on your soapbox for a few minutes. Okay, we're in election season. Okay.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact, believe me, I live in Maine, but we lived in Massachusetts and New Hampshire for years. Okay, I'm a New England guy. All right, and I know for a fact that there's a lot of immigrants, certainly a lot of immigrants in Lowell. Okay, always has been.
Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
Irish has been the predominant Irish, where I have many friends, Irish friends who grew up in Lowell. Has now changed to Cambodians, Vietnamese, et cetera, et cetera. There's a big influx of Asian people, okay, over the course of many years now into Lowell, okay? And by the way, I will recommend Lowell if you're coming to New England, anybody. Coming to Boston, just a little ways north is Lowell, which has this great national park on industry and the textiles and all that sort of stuff. It's really a terrific city, okay? You should go up there. But all that aside, okay, there's there's all the talk about immigrants in this election season, okay? And let me put it this way, and the plea is a bad joke, and it's not even almost a joke. They're not serving house cat on the school menu, okay, in Lowell schools, okay? And the fact that immigration, which this country is built on, okay, has become such a crazy, and everybody likes legal immigration, please. That's what I'm talking about here, okay? But it has created a backlash. All right, and this is bad. This is really, really bad. I'm going to throw it to you, Jess, and I hope that was a decent introduction to it. I know it's on your mind. Yeah.
No, it's the rise in anti-immigrant rhetoric is very much on my mind and on the mind of my colleagues in schools across the country, and I'm deeply, deeply worried. We've been closely tracking the rise in anti-immigrant rhetoric and the rise in threats. And as teachers, we intimately know how dangerous this anti-immigrant rhetoric is for our students' well-being and success. And then also, too, for my book, so one-third of my book looks at important moments, key moments in our history of the last 150 years. And so I've been studying the history of immigrant education. And I also sadly know that such threats are not new. We see the mirrors of these attacks on communities and newcomers who came centuries before. So we've seen those attacks on Chinese immigrants in the 1880s, from Italian, Irish,
on Irish in the 1850s.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Irish, Italian, Eastern European Jewish immigrants at the turn of the 20th century, German immigrants in the 1920s, Mexican immigrants in the 1930s, Muslim immigrants at the turn of the 21st century. The attacks we're seeing today are sadly not new, but they have a profound impact on our students. And so how do we as educators and as schools speak up in support of our immigrant origin students today? It is something we need to do. And I understand that some educators might worry, or some others in the community might worry that they need to be cautious about speaking out against such anti-immigrant rhetoric because they might be targeted as being partisan. And I would say there's nothing partisan about standing up against the demonization of immigrants. Demonization is bullying. And we all need to be speaking up against anti-immigrant rhetoric. And I think, too, important to note that remaining silent sends a powerful and profound message to our immigrant origin students that they are not welcome, that they are not safe, that they don't belong. And we cannot be saying that either with words or with silence. And so it is our job as educators to ensure our immigrant origin students feel safe and seen, that they feel welcome, that their strengths are valued, and that they are secure in the knowledge that all of us believe that they belong here. So this rhetoric that we're seeing today is something that we see again and again in our past, but is deeply, deeply worrying to me and to my colleagues across the country right now.
It is, and I hope over the course of the next few years it calms down. I'm not saying anything profound there. It's just absolutely nuts right now, and it's a bunch of it's basically a bunch of lies. Okay, that they're promulgating. Absolutely. Okay,
but I think
and again, I'm going to say this again. And you're a
Mm-hmm.
history teacher. You have to have legal immigration into this country, and a nice flow of it, but it has to be legal. Okay, that's the way I honestly feel. Okay, I want people to feel secure in coming here, that they're safe and they can start a new life, and they'll go right through the system the right way. And we got to improve the system, which we almost did. Okay, to make that happen. And we just can't. We are everybody I'm talking to is an immigrant, is a descendant of an immigrant. Everybody. So 98%
of us in this country trace our origins elsewhere, whether we came by force or by choice. And this country is so much stronger from the support of newcomers from all over this country, all over this world. And so how do we ensure that we are welcoming newcomers from all across the world, making sure there are ways for us to be able to tap the strengths of so many individuals who make our country so much stronger. And so I think it's really important that we be reimagining what immigrant education looks like, and making sure we're rethinking, our immigration system so that we can be supporting and making, providing equal access for all newcomers.
Absolutely.
So not necessarily prioritizing certain countries over others, but making sure that there are viable ways for newcomers and from folks from all across the country to be able to access the U.S. because we are going to better thrive from welcoming folks from all across the world.
I don't know if you know this. I don't know if I've mentioned it. My wife used to work down at WGBH in Boston, just recently retired from there. And she was very close with a college professor of education in, I think, at Bates up here in Maine, which is in Lewiston, which has an incredible Somalian population, people from Somalia.
Yeah,
okay?
Absolutely.
And what Bates did, and the school district, they worked together to create curriculum, okay, that made sure that everybody in Lewiston kind of understood where these people are coming from and made the Somalians feel at home within the curriculum of the school. And it worked. It worked. Okay,
yeah.
And that's what we have to learn from. And again, it's another thing. They do it up here, and then you don't even hear about it in Lowell. I don't know if you knew that story or not, but it's there's so many connections that need to be made, and nobody's really making them. That's why I'm so glad you're doing it, Jessica. It's just so darn important. Yeah, because all these people are going to be good Americans. They're going to be good citizens. Okay, but they have to feel at home. Okay, we have to understand that they have a lot to offer. Okay, once we can break through any barrier, okay, as a teacher, okay, then we can make them feel at home, get them learn, etc. Tell me some of the stories from your book that you highlight. That you'd like to highlight.
Yeah. Well, so the book follows possibly an unusual structure. So when I first started researching and writing Make Americans, I realized that if we were truly going to reimagine immigrant education, it was essential that we learn from three sets of stories: stories of the past, stories of the present, and stories of the personal. So first, we needed to understand stories of our past, key historic moments from federal laws to landmark Supreme Court cases that have transformed our schools today. And these are, I'm a historian, and so I'm going to get all nerdy about history, but these are just truly remarkable stories, and they're not stories that are often known. I didn't know these stories before I set out to write this book. And so there's stories like the parochial teacher in a one-room schoolhouse in rural Nebraska who was arrested in the 1920s for teaching an 11-year-old boy the Bible in German during recess. And he takes his case all the way up to the Supreme Court, and that case enshrines the right for students to learn and teachers to teach languages other than English in schools. Remarkable story. There's the story
I did not know
of
that.
It's Meyer v. Nebraska, a really fascinating case. And again, comes down to and all of these sort of historical stories are the work of courageous individuals, and these intimate stories of courageous individuals. So there's the story of this rural Nebraskan parochial teacher. There's the story of the families in Southern California, Mexican-American families in Southern California, whose students are segregated in what are called, quote-unquote, Mexican schools at the time. So there were white schools and Mexican schools in Southern California and much of the Southwest. And they organize, they take the funds from the farms that they own and they work on, and they invest that into hiring a civil rights lawyer and suing the school districts. And their case becomes what is known as a blueprint for what ends up being Brown v. Board of Education. And their case helps to desegregate schools in California about a decade or so, a little less than Brown v. Board. There's, of course, also the story of the four courageous undocumented Texan families who sued their school district in the 1970s. And their case enshrines the right for all students across the country, no matter documentation status, to have the right to K-12 education, that every student in this country, every child in this country deserves the right to education. And there's so many historical stories like this that are like really, really important for us to know and to learn from. So there's these stories of the past. Then there are stories of the present, innovative programs happening today in classrooms across the country. So there's like the school in Georgia that is dedicated to refugee girls who have experienced interruptions in their education. Some of these young women may not have been able to go to school for somewhat 10 years or more. And this school is tapping assets, resources in the community, members, volunteers in the community to help come in and work with these young women. It's creating a curriculum that meets each young girl where they are as they recapture years of their education. It's a nimble, sort of very student-specific curriculum. And it's helping these young women who've been denied an education get an education and set them up for success when they go off to high school and college. Or there's 5 schools in Colorado that have banded together to reimagine what schools looks like instead of being like school that's open from, 7 a.m. and closes at 3, but schools being vibrant hubs from sunrise to sundown. And they're tapping nonprofits and immigrant families and community members and local hospitals, and they're bringing all of these different organizations and people together, tapping their strengths. And all of that is in support of student success. So there's stories of the present that are extraordinary and we should learn from. And then finally, there's stories of the personal. And those are stories of my remarkable, remarkable students. And I tell 7 stories of young people.
Tell some of those stories. Tell some of those stories. That was going to be my next question. Tell me from your personal experience in the great city of Lowell, Massachusetts. Okay, some fun examples of all this. And I know there are great ones.
Well, so I can tell you both stories of some of the things we're doing in our classroom, but also these stories of the present are. I had the opportunity to sit down with 7 of my own remarkable students who generously and courageously shared their stories with me so I could share them with you and with others. And we have so much to learn from our young people. If we're going to reimagine what immigrant education looks like, we have to learn from these stories of the past and the present, but we have to learn from our young people about how they experience our schools. And so there is a young woman from Cambodia. She was the daughter of Cambodian genocide, so the Khmer Rouge genocide survivors. And she is so freaking smart. And she wants to be a computer scientist and an entrepreneur. And I remember when she came to me wanting to learn coding, and it was in the middle of the semester, so she couldn't take a coding class. And so she just taught herself how to code. And then within about a year had blown through all the courses that our school offered and taught herself more. And then went off to college. She's now a college graduate, but is looking to careers around coding and entrepreneurship. There is a young woman of mine, one of my former students, who grew up in Iraq during the American-Iraq War. And her family, because her brother worked with the United States in support of the U.S. Army, her family was targeted and they had to flee to Turkey. And then she came here and creating a new life here, and all the strength she brings in navigating systems for her family, because so many of my students are cultural and linguistic navigators for their families. And then in the work she's done as a civic leader in our community, in sort of leading her class in civic projects that have had a profound and powerful and important impact in our community, in being a voice for young people being engaged in communities and working on civic boards and student civic boards, both in Massachusetts and at the state and the national level. So she does extraordinary work. And then there is my student Robert, who is an absolutely remarkable young man who grew up in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Mm-hmm. His family was horrifically murdered when he was a young man, a boy. And he fled by himself across the river to Uganda, lived for a number of years in Uganda, and went to school for the first time at the age of 12. He then lived in a refugee camp where he miraculously met members of extended family, and so had family again. They were able to get refugee resettlement status, which is really, really hard to get. And then they relocated here to Lowell. And then just it's extraordinary in so many ways. So like we think about an old term in teaching immigrant origin students, ESL, English as a second language.
Right.
For Robert, it's ETL. English is a 10th language. That he knows 10 languages. He came to the U.S. as a 17-year-old, having spent only a few years in school, and worked just incredibly hard, started getting all A's, but also was working 40-plus hours, 40 to 50 hours a week as a certified nursing assistant to be a primary breadwinner for his family.
Wow.
And then went off to college, and he's actually finishing up grad school right now. And so just I am so lucky and feel so privileged to be able to learn from students like these three young people and so many more who have extraordinary strengths, who come from all around the world. And our communities are so lucky to have these young people living here.
Yeah, I agree.
And so how do we better invest in them so that we're setting them up for success? Exactly.
And I have to ask something. I'm just going to use Lowell. You taught at Lowell High School, so we'll just use them as the example, okay? You are an exceptional teacher. You're a history teacher, okay, as a social studies teacher. That's what I did. So, you tend to have a sense of cultural differences, okay? Not that other people don't, but my question is, you've got a school that has changed its demographics very strongly over the past 20 years. What's going on in the other classrooms? You must have talked to all your colleagues, okay, to your administration. I'm using Lowell as the example here because we have immigrants coming in at every school district all over the country, rural Iowa, rural North Dakota. I mean, you can go on and on and on, okay? What's going on with the way the teachers at Lowell just teach towards a citizen group of immigrants? It's hard.
So I think, all communities are changing over time, and I think Lowell's a beautiful example of it's been a community of newcomers for centuries. And so this is the work we get to do in reimagining our curriculums, reimagining what our schools look like again and again and again. And I'm so lucky to be able to have worked in Lowell for so long and to learn from colleagues who are constantly thinking about how we make sure that all of our students feel that sense of belonging. Now, in schools across the country, that hasn't always been the case. So I could think about my own family story. So I tell this story in the book. My great-grandfather, Daniel, arrived in the United States as a 7-year-old from what is now Ukraine in 1906.
Oh, wow.
When he arrived, but when he arrived in New York City, his language, his history, his culture, his religion were not wanted or welcome in schools. And so it was in schools that he learned that many of his identities were not something that he should be valuing and bringing forward into his life. And our family lost out on a lot from what was not carried forward, what was lost in terms of our family's history because he was taught that those were things not to value.
That's right.
I think things that
Same
are
thing
really
with my
important
family.
and this
with
is
my
for
family.
so many families.
Stuff was lost.
I think remembering that is really important if your family is not recently immigrated to the country. Remembering the possible impact and profound and possibly negative impact schools had on teaching you what was and what was not important. I think schools today are really grappling with, and I see educators across the country thinking so deeply and thoughtfully about this, of how do we make sure that doesn't happen today, that our students' identities are valued, that they know their strengths are valued. And I see that in our classrooms in Lowell every day, how we're rethinking curriculums, rethinking what the halls look like, rethinking the food we serve in the cafeteria, so that it shows our students that they are valued, that their strengths are recognized and really wanted, and that they can bring their full selves to schools and to communities.
Yeah, and you just reminded me of something when you were going through that, and I hadn't thought about it in years, but when I was teaching, there was the theory of immigration. Is the nation a melting pot or a salad bowl? Okay, Have you ever heard that one? Okay, because a melting pot, we all become the same. We're a salad bowl. We all mix together well, but we retain our individual identities. Okay,
Yep.
it was an interesting question when I was teaching, because everybody always says America is a melting pot, but I think it's more of a salad bowl, which is a good thing. What do you think, melting pot or salad bowl, Jessica?
Well,
Boy,
I think
that's an old theory. I got to tell you, I haven't thought about that
in a long time. It is
an old
theory. It's an old theory. I think they have elements of both. I don't know what that makes in terms of a meal. That I think at our best, we are hopefully ensuring and sending the message to our newcomer young folks that we want them to be investing in all of their identities. And so that could be ensuring that they continue practicing, maintaining, and investing in their languages. I mean, we want more folks in this country to be speaking multiple languages. It's better for our communities. It's better for
absolutely.
business.
You know, the old joke, you call somebody who speaks 3 languages trilingual, and if they speak 2 languages, they're bilingual, and if they speak 1 language, you call them American.
Right.
The old joke.
So, right.
Yeah.
So how do we, and that's just one example of like our communities are stronger for our students continuing to invest in and find value in the identities they bring with them. I think too likely, like young people, just like my great-grandfather, will change and will learn from being in a community that is so diverse, and so will take on elements or ideas or ways of thinking or traditions from the folks around them. I get to, as you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, I have the honor and privilege and joy of working with students from 30 different countries in a classroom.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's the most beautiful thing to watch them become friends and to learn from each other and their curiosity. And so they're changed by that as well. And so a salad bowl, the lettuce is never going to be altered by the tomatoes. But in
got you going here with that one. I got you going here with that one.
To go. But with a stew, you can't identify any of those individual parts. So it's a little bit of both.
It is.
But we want to make sure students don't feel like, and adults too, that don't feel like they have to give up all of the amazing things they bring to find acceptance. That has been the case sometimes in the past, and it should not be the case in our present or in our future. Absolutely.
And before we go, I want to ask you about the National We Are America project.
Yeah.
Okay, you launched this in 2019. Of course, then we had the pandemic, which messed up everything. Okay, but to talk about that, what is that?
Absolutely. So I think one of the things I really strive to do in my classroom is to do work that is meaningful for my students, both in the class, but also where there are opportunities for students to take their learning out into the community, to become teachers and leaders in the community. So early in October, my students write a cookbook of favorite family recipes from around the world, and we publish that cookbook out in the community, and that's shared widely. They write op-eds about issues they care about, and a selection of those are published in the local newspaper. We do action civic projects where we're working with local community to create real change. As much as possible, we are taking our work outside the walls of our classrooms to have impact in the community. The We Are America project started as a book in our class. My students were grappling with what it meant to be American. Some of my students felt they belonged. Some of my students weren't sure if they belonged. And some of my students felt they belonged but weren't sure others thought they belonged. And so we were grappling with ideas of belonging and identity, and recognizing, too, that every generation of Americans gets to redefine what it means to be American today. And that hopefully together we get to expand what that definition means to make it more inclusive of more young people. And so we set out to write a book where each student chose one story of self and shared that story in a short piece. We published that book and we shared it across the community. And it got a lot of traction. People were really excited about it. We held some conversations at local universities. And at the end of that year, my students came to me and said, we want this work to continue. And they were about to graduate and grades were in, the course was over. But that afternoon, we mapped out the idea for a national project on the whiteboards in my classroom. And that summer, I revised my curriculum that I taught them, and we created an application and a whole bunch of materials, and we sent it out across the country. And teachers started applying. And now we are in year 6 of the National We Are America project, and I get to work with my former students now as colleagues and friends. And we are collaborating with teachers across the country and mentoring them who use our curriculum, and they in turn work with their students to help each of their students choose a story of self. We then fund them to lay out and publish a book of their student stories that they each get 100 copies of their book to share in their school and community. And the stories of the young people sit on our website. And so that all of us across the country get to learn from these young people from across the country, and to hopefully find connections with young people who perhaps we didn't think we might have connections with, but find those moments of connections that builds empathy across difference, to learn from young people, and to have all of us be thinking more broadly about what it means to be American, more inclusively about what it means to be American. And this is a conversation being led by the next generation.
I'm going to end this podcast with 4 simple words. Jessica, you are something.
Oh, thank you so much.
No, I mean, you are just the epitome of all this. Just got to say, it's just great what you're doing. I'm so happy you came on the show. That's all I can say. Good luck with the book. We got everything linked here. I'll send you a copy of the podcast. And what can I say, Jessica Lander? Thank you. This is great.
Thank you so much for the conversation and for your kind words.
You are more than welcome.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Have a great rest of Sabbatical. Okay. Have fun.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Jess.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Okay, everybody. You heard it. Wow. That's all I have to say. Just wow. All right, we're going to archive the show over at ace-ed.org. My name is Larry Jacobs. Please check out everything we do, and please share this with your colleagues.